So, good evening. I'm gonna call this meeting to order, which is the budget workshop number 1 at 7. So can everyone please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are going to move the consent agenda to in-person on Thursday. So if anyone has any questions or comments, we will change that to Thursday's meeting, which is the 25th. No, the 26th. Sorry, 26th. So now I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Mazie. Hold on, Frank, you got on mute.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see the presentation before I get started. Can you see it okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. Good evening, everyone. We are finally getting around to budget workshop number 1 after the twice removed cancellations due to the snow. Someone didn't want us to have this presentation, it seems, back in January when it was originally scheduled. And then again this past Monday, but I'm happy that we're here this evening together to get the budget process that we've been working on for the past few months underway. Quick review of our budget workshop schedule. The new date, obviously today being the first one, we're going to go over the general support areas of central administration and the operational areas. We're also going to do a review of the governor's budget and a recap of what our property tax cap calculation looks like at this point in time. You may recall from previous years that we typically do that on budget workshop number 2, but given the change in the dates, and we'll get into this, but given the change in the dates now and our requirements to make sure that we file it this week, we'll include that information in this presentation. Our second budget workshop meeting will cover all the instructional areas that will take place on March 9th. On March 30th, we will review the final piece of the budget development process, which is staffing and benefits, our in-fund transfer to capital, community schools, revenues, tax rate, etc. There's a lot of information that will be included in that budget workshop. And then that will be the night that we will have our final presentation for the board to consider for their adoption of the budget. And then we'll culminate the process on May 7th with the budget hearing. So when we begin, we start out with this each and every year when we sit down at the cabinet level and then at our administrative levels through our admin council meetings. We start talking about what our objectives are of the budget development and what we hope to get out of it. And one of the things that you've heard me say in previous years, especially when we talk about our look aheads and our multi-year planning, is one of the things I'm probably most proud of is that we're not a one and done district. And what I mean by that is we're not looking to introduce something one year and then forget about it in subsequent years and moving on to the next thing. We really are unpacking them. We're really making sure that it's taking hold in our district and we're seeing these things through. And I think that's what's leading to our success. So you'll see the word continue on all these objectives because much like previous years, we're looking to continue the things that are fueling our success. And like I said, see them through. So we want to continue to utilize data to inform and strengthen our academic programs. We want to continue to increase our community engagement and our outreach. Continue to support our social, emotional, and our mental health of our students. We want to continue to enhance our safety and the well-being of our students and staff, and overall make sure our building envelopes are as safe as they possibly can be. We want to continue to develop the college, career, and civic readiness for all of our students. And then lastly, we want to continue to increase our cultural competencies district-wide. These are things that we hold near and dear to our hearts. And, now that I think about it, one of the things that we could also include is our approach to our budgeting each and every year. It would make this list easily that we continue our approach to put forth a fiscally responsible, and acceptable budget by our community. And our community has spoken out in volume in the last 3 years, showing their overall overwhelming support for the budgets that we've put forth. So I think it's what we're doing and to say that we're continuing is we're on the right path. Some of the factors, though, for this year, as we look toward our budgeting for 26 and 27, we broke it out as we do each year with our internal and external factors. So on the internal side, we're going to talk more about this, but our bond borrowing, the bond referendum that we went out for in the 2024 vote is now coming to fruition. So we're going to start to see now the effects of what this new debt looks like. And you'll hear us talk more about that in tonight's meeting and then also subsequent meetings. We have our pending contract negotiations that are always at the forefront of our internal factors. Another one is to continue all of our supports for our one-to-one electronic device initiative. And this includes our increased focus on our cybersecurity protections. And that's another good one for me to really stress that it's never a one and done. It's something that myself, Mr. Richroth, Ms. Simonello, and I are constantly looking at. In fact, we have a webinar tomorrow that's dedicated to this, learning more and more about the things that we can do to safeguard the personally identifiable information of our students and staff. And then finally, as we do all the time, we look at our staffing needs and we look at our retirements to determine where we can save money through either retirements or through attrition. And that's something that the cabinet and I work at diligently in order to make sure that we're meeting all the instructional needs of our students, but also making sure that we are cognizant of the savings that we can realize through these efforts. Now, on the external side, some of the more prominent things are we have our building condition survey, and that's done by our architects, and that identifies building facility needs and repairs and suggested improvements. These are done on a recommendation basis, but we are seeing increased repair costs at our facilities throughout the district. And this is taking on an even more significant role as we look toward not just this year, but now toward the next few years in particular. And more to come on that in tonight's meeting and then budget workshop number 3 as well. Now, when we talk about some of our tax cap implications, there's some budget drivers that I always like to share because when we go through this, you'll see that when we talk about that 2% tax cap, when you get to compare this to CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, we need to take the lower of the two numbers. So with CPI being roughly 2.6, we're forced to only increase our tax cap by a maximum of 2%. More to come on that as when we get to the tax cap formula at the end of this presentation. And then also same with our tax-based growth factor, which is really just a tick over 1%. Continued increases in our health insurance premiums. That's a significant one. We'll get into this a little bit more as well, but we're looking at premiums that have increased approximately 9.5% over the past 4 years alone. And then finally, mandates. I included the ones that we've been talking about in the past few years, but the first two are ones that we got hit with, late last year after the budget development cycle was done, but our distraction-free zones and the impact that had on our preparations to make sure that we were in compliance. The same with the extreme heat policy. That's another one that Ms. Kennedy and I have been talking about, along with Mr. Noonan, as to how we're going to make sure that we meet those mandates associated with this policy. And then we'll talk a little bit more tonight about the zero emission busing and how that's going to impact us when we get to the transportation piece. So now we talk about the governor's budget. The budget was released on 2026, and that was a while ago. But what the big takeaways were that total school aid is an impressive number. She has an increase of just over $39 billion. And that's an increase of like 4.32% overall for the budget. But our state aid increase came in at approximately 1.8. And that's over the amount that was budgeted by us in our state aid run last year. Now, this included a guaranteed minimum for our district of 1%. That's the minimum increase that was included. And that affected not just us, but 460 other districts in the state out of 674 in totality. It's one of the bigger legislative topics that many districts are fighting with such a small increase in foundation aid, but we are in that majority that was impacted by this. Just as a point of reference, though, I thought you'd find it interesting to see that that's the lowest increase in state funding and foundation aid since COVID, when it was a 0% increase. And I went back even further than that. The last time we had such an increase this low was back in 2015-16 when it was 2.8%. So just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective, like a decade ago, we got more of an increase than we've gotten this year. Now, this also includes the state aid increase includes an increase rather of 335,000 for our universal pre-K funding. It's a proposed mandate, and it's only a proposal at this time that would stipulate districts by the years 2028-29, we'd be required to provide a full day seat for any child that's eligible that's seeking enrollment in the universal pre-K program. And then overall, the formulation calculations for state aid, there were no changes to the budget for building aid, transportation aid, et cetera, all the aid categories, including the one I just wanted to share was our community schools set aside. That amount remains unchanged from last year, and it's been the same now for the past few years. So now we're going to go into the different budget areas, and we're going to start with the budget areas for our Board of Education, District Clerk, our annual vote, and our superintendent codes. You're going to see overall, I should say this at the onset, you're going to see overall that the challenge was really set forth early on back in November to really have really close to the vest budgeting this year because we really had no idea of what to expect coming out of Albany. And we know we as a district are facing a number of changes going into next year that we want to be cognizant of. So you're going to see that a lot here, but I still did highlight the areas in yellow that I wanted to call out some of the more prominent increases or decreases for your edification. And as a reminder, each one is included with a note at the bottom of the slide. So like I said, when you look at the first area for the Board of Ed, it's a nominal increase. That's why there's nothing highlighted there. It's merely a $105 increase on that budget line in totality. And for the district clerk, $610 increase. The first one you'll see, though, is we're highlighting under the annual vote. The district meeting is a negative $2,400 on the voting machine rentals line. And that's because the Suffolk County Board of Elections is no longer renting machines to us for the annual vote. But they projected to make them available to the district at no cost following this year's usage. So it's something certainly for us to keep an eye on if we can procure that and take advantage of that for subsequent years. On the superintendent's line, we did increase that by $2,700 in the area of travel and conference. This proposed increase is for all the professional development that we feel our new superintendent would benefit taking advantage of, and the ability to attend all local and regional conferences as they settle in as our new leader of our district next year. I'm sorry, let me go back one second. The grand total, we put subtotals on each page as well, and we'll have a total for all areas at the end of the presentation. And also be mindful, this presentation will be uploaded to the website on the business office page so that you can take a look at and peruse at your convenience beginning tomorrow. But the total for all these areas is actually a negative $1,600, negative 2% overall. Now we head into the areas of the business office and auditing and the treasurer codes. The one that I wanted to call your attention to is in the middle for the auditing services. You'll see a $4,000 increase on that line, roughly 5%. And that's just reflecting the contractual increases that are in accordance with the RFP. That stands for Request for Proposals that we received as part of our professional services bidding. So that number is in concert with that. But overall, these totals, that's the big driver of this, roughly $7,000 for these areas in totality, and a 2.4% increase on these lines. Moving now ahead to our legal services, our insurance, memberships, judgments, and claims. This is where you see a lot of yellow, and this is what we were alluding to prior. Now, the additional legal services, I do apologize, it was not highlighted. It will be when we post tomorrow to the web at this line. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it is the third line from the top. It says additional legal services. It's a $153,000 increase. Okay. We are trying to account for the legal fees associated with the increased number of superintendent's hearings that we're experiencing, the number of increased manifestations for students with disabilities, and other anticipated legal claims that have been levied upon the district. On average, though, I was taking a look back, there have been significant increases in this line of roughly 28% per year over the past 6 years. So we are trying to get our budget to be more in line with what we're experiencing in actuality. And that's the reason for that large increase. The next few lines, though, are all in the insurance areas. And you heard me mention the insurance areas before, but on average, there have been significant increases of roughly 16.25% over there for just the past 3 years. Really across the board on our insurances, but certainly look at our property insurance, including our umbrella provisions. Our cyber insurance is included in there, and our school board legal liabilities. But that's why you see these large thousands of dollars and double-digit increases in many cases. So overall, this will be a big one in terms of our summation, but this is roughly almost $500,000 or a 22% increase just in these areas alone. Now we move to the area of human resources. The only line we have highlighted for this is the contractual services line, and this is to account for the new requirement by New York State. There's a security guard hiring fee that they've implemented, and so Dr. Cohen has reflected that in his budget. That is the big driver, as you can see, and the reason for the 6% increase on his budget. Without that mandate, you'd notice that he would have almost a flat or 0% increase on his budget in totality. And then moving to the area of childcare, we do have a 0%. This is proposed budget. I always point this out each year. These are estimates that we put in there for the school year, supplies that we're going to need, for the contractual expenses that are associated, and also for our electronic attendance and invoicing software. But as a reminder, expenses incurred in this program are offset by the Child and Adult Care Food Program, CACFP, and the corresponding revenue that's realized through the enrollment fees in this program. Now moving on to the area of planned facilities. There's a couple of things that Mr. Noonan and I have been looking at as we try to navigate the challenges brought forth by our district. I alluded to some of these earlier. You're going to hear this theme throughout because it has been prevalent. We are experiencing increases in this area. It's always been driven by utilities, has been a big one, but the number of repairs that we're experiencing and increases across the line have really been hitting the district hard. And despite our efforts to do as much as we can in-house, we're experiencing outward pressures that are leading to these increases. One of the first is on the line of custodial supplies. We've been looking at our 3-year average of our actual expenditures in order to keep up with the maintenance of our buildings on the custodial side, and realize that we need a $20,000 increase on this to be on par with that. That's the first line with the 5.63% increase. Moving down though here, the utilities that I mentioned earlier, increases on these lines are significant in terms of the dollars, not so much in the percentages with the exception of maybe the water line, but in terms of it's not so much the dollars, but the percentage. But we're very aware of these because, like I said, we seem to find this out, and we use the forecasting methods based on our previous year measures, but also what industry experts are telling us they could be, because we need to forecast this to the best we can, and we're trying to predict out roughly 18 months into the future in some cases. For the custodial piece of planned facilities, we're looking at a $76,000 increase or 2%, 2.18% to be precise. Moving to the maintenance side, when we talk about the equipment line now, we are looking to replace an older vehicle, a new van with shelving units in it, and also to replace one of the golf carts that is used by our grounds team. That's the first line that you see there, and the $15,000 increase on that line. And these are not the only things, just these are not the only things within that budget, certainly, but these are some of the highlights within it, the reasons I try to give you the reasons for the big budget drivers or the increases that you'll see there. Moving down to the maintenance supplies line, again, on the material side, we're seeing those increases that we talked about from the marketplace, But we've tried to hone in more on this because we've increased this. We're trying to do more with utilizing our in-house staff to perform these repairs in hopes that we can start to see reductions on our contractual services lines wherever possible on the maintenance. So you'll see many of those lines down below are flat with regard to our contractual codes where it says, if you can see my mouse, my cursor rather, but CONT is contractual building repairs maintenance, and why we kept that line flat this year. So the overall increase would be about $113,000, just under 2% in terms of its increase, 1.95 to be precise. Now looking at security, Mr. Ahern has taken a look at this budget, and the first piece that's highlighted is on our supplies line. That is to account for the uniform requirements. We have a new collective bargaining agreement that took place this past year, went into effect, and he's reflected on his line to make sure that we are meeting that contractual obligation and has increased that line in accordance for the uniform requirements. On the contractual services line, that's for the maintenance of our new vape detectors that we utilize at our secondary schools, and also to assist with the maintenance on our new roving vehicle that was purchased in the current year budget. Overall, for this budget, we're looking at about an $8,000 increase in totality, just under 4% in terms of the overall increase. On the print shop line, Mr. Mello has done a great job of keeping this budget nearly flat. You'll notice that if we didn't have to replace the cutting machine, she would actually have a negative overall budget. The cutting machine alone, we're looking at an increase of $12,000 on that equipment line. It's really because we can no longer get the parts to have it to get it fixed or to have it serviced. So that's why we see an increase on this particular line. Otherwise, we're looking at right now a $790 increase, a 0.17% increase in totality. Now, moving toward technology, I mentioned earlier one of our overall objectives is to keep our focus on our one-to-one devices and those initiatives. You're going to hear that come through I believe, on the next slide. But first, we turn our attention to our data processing software. Unfortunately, the company that we use for managing and hosting all of those, the district virtual servers, has been acquired by another entity. And as a result, our renewal costs have tripled. Thus, that's why we have a $49,000 increase on that line of 11%. On our contractual services line, this is for ongoing maintenance. This is for the integration of our security lockdown systems, includes our phones, our bells, our digital signage, and our public address systems that were done with the COVID monies as part of the ARP grant some years back. That's the reasons behind the $34,000 increase on that line. And you'll see that those are the big drivers, but overall, we see a nice decrease on our AV line, which we could have really highlighted. That's on the lower section there, where my cursor is. So it really helps to thwart this increase and bring it down to a $13,000 decrease for that particular line to try to offset the $82,000 increase up above. But here's where the devices come into play. On our computer hardware line, this is the next phase. And Mr. Rich Roth and I have sat down and are looking to figure out how to implement this. We've utilized other sources in the past. We utilized our grant monies to a great extent. We've used other means from the state, but they were to help us bide our time. We need to now replace devices. This includes the introduction for 2 grades. Grades 3 and either grade 6 or 7. We're going to take a look at that when we get to year end. But to have the 2 installments for our students, and also to be replacing our teacher laptops, which have aged now and they're nearing end of life. And what he does typically is he'll look at the amount of repairs required, not just for our student devices, but also for our staff devices. When we see those numbers increasing beyond what we can handle, that's the time when we look to replace them. And we're looking to do this over 2 years for them. And then the last line would be the computer software line. This is the increase in costs needed for the number of license for not just our existing programs, but we have new applications requested by our instructional directors. This is designed also to assist with things such as homebound instruction, credit recovery, and our summer school programs. In totality, for all of technology, the previous slide included looking about $832,000 in terms of the increase. This is the biggest impact on our operational areas, but for very good reason, as you saw, the $700,000 alone for the student devices, but it does equate to about a 30% increase in all. Now moving on to the transportation area, you'll see we've highlighted the first line, the purchase of a bus. So the requested budget is for the request of a gasoline bus. Once again, we do have the permissibility to do that within the state. This was prescribed to be the last year we can do that, but it only represents a $2,000 increase on that line because the cost is slightly more than last year when we introduced the last bus. And this is always to replace our older models in our fleet. But we also are closely watching the zero emission bus mandate. Mr. Toops, Ms. Simonello, and myself have been watching this, and the state recently introduced a waiver. But taking advantage of the waiver will be very strategic for us because it is a 2-year waiver. We can wait till next year to implement this. Instead of having to comply by 2027, we can introduce this next year and then push that date out to 2029 before we need to be in compliance with our purchases. And I want to be clear, there's 2 dates. The first was the date by which we could make non-zero emission bus purchases. Okay, so gasoline or diesel. We can do that now through 27. We, like I said, with the waiver, we can then take advantage of it. So we will be talking about this next year. But right now, they have not extended the date of 2035, by which time all buses in operation must be zero emission. So there's more to come on that. We have not heard anything about that date moving as yet, but certainly that is our hope. Then moving down on the page for contractual transportation, we're looking at about a $480,000 increase. This accounts for the additional routing needs within our district. This is also for students requiring transportation for those attending private or parochial schools outside of the district confines. But it's also in addition to the contractual rate increases that are part of our agreements for our large and our small buses. And finally, we've included a $5,000 increase on our field trip line. And that's because we want to include, make sure we have the monies available for the special busing needs to address our students with disabilities attending those field trips. So to make sure that we have adequate handicap buses available for this purpose, in addition to the one that we have in our own fleet. In totality, for all of transportation, with the big budget driver being the contractual piece, it's looking at a $510,000 increase or 5.32%. So here's the overall proposal for the first areas that I just went through. In totality, we're looking at $1.9 million in terms of its increase. This equates to a 9% increase overall. You see the summations for each of the areas that I've previously gone through. But just to kind of put this in perspective, when you have, $240+ million budget, and you're looking at a requested budget of all these areas of just about 23.5 million, this represents less than 10% of our overall budget. As we know, the benefits and staffing is our largest piece, and the next one will be in our budget workshop number 2, when we're going to cover all of the different instructional areas, which will also include our BOCES services. And those will be the big budget areas as well. Now, let's talk about the property tax cap. So I mentioned earlier some of this information, but just to reiterate, the tax-based growth factor that we can apply when we start the process is just really a hair over 1. It's 1.0021. You'll see that on the next slide where that factors in to the formula. The next bullet talks about the inflation factor. And I mentioned how the CPI is currently 2.63%. But we must use the lower of 2% or CPI, in this case, we're going to be going with 2% since inflation is higher than that. You'll see that in the formula. The projected formula yield right now would constitute our maximum levy for the district. That is $138,831,320. What this means in terms of our levy growth from budget to budget is just over $4.2 million. This is a 3.15% increase. But you'll see that last bullet. This is what I alluded to earlier. Our draft, and this is certainly just a draft at this time because we still have to share a lot of information with the Board of Education and the community as we finalize this formula. But we have to file our draft no later than March 1st. Since March 1st is a Sunday this year, they are requiring that we file it by this Friday, the 27th. So with the board's approval, we will be filing this draft tomorrow. And this is the formula that I just talked about, and it can seem very overwhelming, but we've highlighted some of the areas for your convenience. At the top, you'll see that tax-based growth factor. The next highlighted line is the allowable levy growth factor, which is the 2%. Some of the exclusions listed in that second bold section. Okay, you'll see we have our debt service. That's for our new bond borrowing. We have our capital exclusion amount from BOCES. We have the anticipated amount from the transfer to capital, which is something we'll be covering in Budget Workshop 3. But just as a quick reminder of what this is and why this is so important, this is a way that we've included these numbers in the budget for our interfund transfer to capital each and every year, because it's a way for us to do smaller capital projects and address the needs of our facilities that are rapidly depreciating and breaking down in the number of issues. We can address these smaller capital projects without the need to borrow and incur more bonded debt. That's why that's so critically important. And then there's the purchase of the bus as well in there. What it culminates in is the highlighted green number down below. The maximum amount that we can put in there for the tax levy is that number, that $138 million number that I shared with you. The allowable budget to budget levy growth is the bold number at the bottom, which is just over 4 million. And there's that percentage of the 3.15%. But I do want to reiterate, this is just a proposal. More information to come before the board finalizes this on March 30th. Now, speaking of, just to reiterate, our next budget workshop presentation will be 2 weeks from this past Monday, March 9th. It'll be at Saxton Middle School auditorium at 8 p.m. And we'll be covering all the areas related to curriculum instruction, all the areas under the special education and pupil services, budget codes, and BOCES. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Frank, can you just go back to there was a slide in the beginning that said something about pre-K and full-time. Can you go back to that slide? I just
Sure. Under the governance? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I compound on you going back to that slide with Diana? I was going to ask this, but I wasn't sure if this was the right meeting. But since Diana has you going back to it, I went to 2 different meetings recently, the legislative breakfast and another BOCES budget meeting. And from what I understood, the governor is giving us $10,000. She's upping the money to $10,000 per student for pre-K and for universal pre-K, but we have to offer it to every student that wants to do full day universal pre-K in our district. But I felt like we don't have enough space for that, right, Lori? So are we now bound? If we have a space issue, but it's in the budget and we can't fulfill that, how do we go about doing this?
That's a wonderful question, because like us, a lot of districts are faced with that same challenge, which is why it's only a proposal at this time, because you are correct, that anyone who is eligible and is interested, we have to have a seat for them. So this would be an adaptation. The year that we'd have to have this in effect, as I mentioned, is 28-29 school year. So there's a lot more that has to come out of this. But this was one of the pieces within the state aid, a special line within there of $335,000. that we take a look at and we say, well, we don't know, like I said, necessarily if this is necessarily feasible for us at this point in time, but it's worth pointing out because not only can things change between now and 2028, 29, they may change between now and the time the legislative piece comes in and they finalize the state budget for this year. So this may die before it even gets that far. But I did want to at least point it out because it is a big amount right now. It's a big topic of conversation for many districts faced with the same challenge.
And also to kind of expand on that, Mr. Mazie and I have also been speaking because although they're giving us additional funding, they're also increasing the rate that we can be charged by other outside community-based organizations. So even though they're giving you more money, it's going to cost you more money to service the students. So sometimes you really it kind of offsets each other, right? You're getting more money, but it's costing you more money. So how are we going to handle that as well? So, one of the conversations is, again, it is a proposal, but if you are going to be required to provide a seat, not only do you have to have the space, but if the money that you're getting from the state doesn't cover that, then where does that fall? It falls into your general fund, right? Because there's no other way to compensate if you indeed have to offer a seat. Because right now, we know that our current UPK funding that we receive does not cover the cost of every child wanting a seat if they chose one. We have over 500 students that are in our district, let's say in a given cohort. So do we have room for another 550 UPK students? And will the money that the state gives us cover the costs for all of them? The answer is absolutely not.
My understanding is also that there were several different ways to offer the UPK. We could either do it in-house or contract out to somebody else. But then, like Mrs. Kennedy said, it's a cost factor of what they're going to charge us. But we don't have to have all those seats in-house. We can
Correct. We
spread
don't.
them
Right
out.
now we have about, we have Scope, we have NIS, we have Just Kids. We contract out to the YMCA
YMCA.
right now. And we also had Head Start, but we also haven't received many when we go out to bid. There hasn't been many community-based organizations even looking to go after the bid award. And if they are, they're looking for space themselves, right? So that's one thing they're saying, yes, we'll be a community-based organization, but can you give us space for us to run it? That's why Scope is using our space, as is Just Kids and NIS.
How many students do we house in our pre-K in-house as opposed to the number of cohort, that comes into kindergarten?
Ms. Marone is on, but I would want to say right now we're just under 300, about 270 students.
260, something like that.
Yeah, it's about 270.
And our cohorts are like 500 to 600, right?
Right.
In the fives.
530, 550, somewhere around there. About half, just
Okay.
over.
Thank you.
Trustee Andrade, did we cover the points you were going to make? She's still there?
Yeah, sorry. I heard that this was a conversation and a push from the state. So I just wanted to see exactly when and what this entails. And, obviously there's transportation linked to this too. And, there's always more to all of it.
Yeah, it's a big conversation piece among all districts right now. Okay, other questions?
I just want to go back to that for the transportation. I think it's only transportation if they're not in, but for pre-K, unless they're special education, I believe the transportation is the parents have to drive them to the pre-K. I don't believe in the conversation that it's actually us providing the transportation. From what I remember the told, but I'll make sure I'll get back to you on that. But I almost
Yeah.
believe that the parents have to drive their children to and from.
Currently,
do
that
think-
is the case. You're correct.
think so.
So
Correct.
UPK, you're not required to supply transportation. Again, not knowing what this new mandate is going to hold for us, but currently transportation is not included in UPK unless their IEP.
I have a question about the triple data processing fees because the company was acquired. First, I want to say a $13,000 decrease on that budget line. Yay, well done, sir. But because that was is there a possibility that we'll be able to get a new vendor for that, or is we got what we got and we don't complain?
Well, I will let Mr. Richroth speak to that, but he and I are of the same mindset. He's constantly looking for alternatives. We don't just take these them sitting down, meaning at face value, I should say.
Mhm.
We're constantly looking, but I can let him speak to more of the specifics because it's certainly not as easy as that.
Sure, thank you. So what happened is VMware was purchased by Broadcom. It happened probably about 2 years ago, maybe a little longer. That's kind of really the brains of our entire network. It houses all of our virtual servers, allows us, to connect to the internet, filter, do all of that fun stuff. And what they did is, and this is something districts and all of education is kind of dealing with right now, is they came in and they jacked up the price. And they're kind of really making it known that they don't really care so much about education anymore. So it's something other districts are struggling with as well. We've been very lucky. Their billing is not so great, so we have not felt the increase that other districts have felt initially about 2 years ago when they started seeing the increases. So we didn't see the increases until this upcoming year. They sent us finally the renewal that reflecting the new increases. We are actively looking for alternative options. Unfortunately, VMware is kind of the industry standard. It's the best out there. It's the most secure, has the best reliability. So new players are starting to enter the realm, but it's just nerve-wracking to switch over and kind of the brains of the daily life of everything that we do, from card access, entering the buildings, students getting on, teachers getting online, to an upstart. So we are looking at alternatives, but there isn't a clear winner right now that I would feel comfortable making that switch to.
All right, thank you, sir.
Can I also ask about the iPads? Where are we as far as who has them? I know kindergarten and first.
First grade. Mhm.
Are we, is there a plan to expand it into second grade and have them keep the iPads home? And because I know there's kids, there's damage that's done to some of these laptops that being traveled back and forth. So is that a conversation of expanding the iPads into some of the lower grades so that we can, defeat that purpose of damage?
Sure, I can answer that, Frank, if you want.
Sure.
So we are K1 with iPads. We did that last year. Next year, we're looking at doing second grade with iPads with keyboards, and keeping them in the classrooms. And you're correct. We have seen a dramatic decrease, in damages to laptops. We have only one broken iPad in K1 so far this year, which is tremendous. And that's a huge savings. So expanding at K1-2, leaving them in the classrooms, providing them with the keyboard so they can get their typing skills up, and get ready for the state tests. And that's really the tricky part. If we look to expand it any further into third, fourth, fifth grade, that's when they start taking the state tests and typing and stuff like that. So we'll evaluate next year at second grade, do the trainings and stuff like that, and then we can take it from there. But for right now, K1-2 would be iPads and laptops 3 through 12.
Thank you.
Okay. Did anyone else have any other questions?
Not for here, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you everyone for being here, being in attendance this evening, and for your support. Like I said, I want to make sure that you see this, and it's always helpful, as you remember, when you go through a budget development, to see that it's all going to slowly come together. It's hard when you are looking at just one particular area, but to start to see in totality. So I try to give you that frame of reference as to what to expect and when, because I think it helps the conversation in terms of what we are as a district. But I thank everyone for their time and attention this evening. I hope you have a nice night.